So the afternoon will go on like this. The first part will be really an interaction between myself and Jenny, our guest speaker today. And she'll hopefully give a synopsis of how you can get into a career in journalism, how you can become an author or a broadcaster. And then I'm hoping that the latter half, which is the next 30 minutes, you'll be able to ask her questions directly. So welcome everyone. We are now live on Facebook, and also we're in this web conferencing. I would like to welcome you all young people to our meeting today. The main emphasis of the meeting today, I've called it a career cafe. Why? It's because when you go into a cafe, you order what you like. And the cafe should have a range of things to sell you. So essentially what we're trying to do is to help you to have an insight into some of the careers that I call top careers, but also some that may require a little bit of thinking or even things to do before you get into the careers. So without much further ado, our first guest on this first ever show is none other than Jenny Kleeman. She is an award-winning journalist, author, and broadcaster. And I'm pleased to say that her work is in print. She has written extensively for the Guardian newspaper, and also on audio. You can listen to her breakfast show Fridays to Sundays, 6 to 10 a.m. Times Radio, and also on video. And she, up to probably a few months ago, she was presenting the newspaper review, which is an evening program looking at the papers for the morning. So over to you, Jenny. The floor is yours. May I just say, maybe you can start by introducing yourself a little bit more and tell us where it all started. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm very happy to be here. Let me start off by saying that what I am, those are all the different things I do, but what I am officially is I'm a freelance journalist, which means I am a journalist that doesn't have a staff job anywhere. There is no one company that employs me. And that's part of the reason why I do so many of these different things, is because I take contracts in different places, or I get paid to write an article, or I get paid to write a book. And I make my income from a wide variety of sources, really. And it's an interesting way to live. It is, in some respects, a difficult way to live, because it means that my income isn't very stable. But it also means that I am always doing interesting things. I'm always being challenged. I'm always having to go into new worlds, different worlds, and learn about subjects that fascinate me. And I never have to cover a story that I don't want to do just because my editor or my boss says, go and interview this person. I'm always doing things that I find fascinating. So I started in this work by mistake. I went to university, I got a degree, and then I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be in a band. And I decided to try and be a freelance journalist, or to do work in short-term contracts so that I could do my music at the same time. But my music wasn't very good, it turns out. It's probably a very good thing that I didn't become a rock star, which is what I wanted to be. It turned out I was much better at the journalism. So as Mandela said, there are many, many different things that I do. At the moment, the main thing that I do is I present this radio show for 4 hours every Friday, Saturday and Sunday morning. This morning I woke up at 3:30 to go to my studio, which is in the building where the Times newspaper is made. And I was on air between 6 and 10. And that is a very, very different style of thing to the other stuff I do, which is I write very long articles, and I write books. And those articles, they take a long time to write. I'm probably interviewing 6 or 7 different people to write them. So I've got lots of experience of very different kinds of media, radio and television. I've made documentaries. I've been a foreign correspondent, and I've traveled the world doing documentaries. Also newspapers, I've made a podcast. And I think nowadays, if you want to be a journalist, you have to be like a multimedia journalist. You have to be somebody who's prepared to work in lots of different formats, and you have to have lots of different skills. 10 or 20 years ago, if you wanted to be a journalist, you just needed to know how to type and how to interview people. But now you need to be prepared to learn lots of new skills all the time. You have to be nimble and flexible. Shall I go on and say some more? You're still muted, Mandela. Shall I can carry on talking? I don't know if you have any specific questions.
But what is interesting is that you have pointed out one thing that is helpful for our young people, that in the past, journalism was just almost like a one-way system. You just knew what you had to do. But now you've got to be multi-talented, involve a lot of media. And our young people, we know that they're computer savvy at the moment. And do you think that will stand them in good stead, that if they choose a career in journalism, then they are already geared to be able to use the media that's available, especially the social media?
I think in one respect, yes, it's a great thing if you're capable in that. But I think, when I was growing up, I could be a journalist without having already demonstrated that I had done citizen journalism or blogging, or I had a big platform on social media online. I didn't have to demonstrate that. I think now, if you want to go into journalism, you need to show that you have already found a way of trying to find an audience by writing a blog, or maybe having made a YouTube channel, that you have tried it out a little bit yourself first. So in one respect, it's great for young people because they are growing up having to learn a variety of skills. But also, I think that the expectation is that you have proved your ability a little bit earlier than I had to do. One piece of advice that I would give young people, and I think this applies across all industries and not just mine, but I think it is difficult to overemphasize this. If you are an intelligent person who has ideas and is reliable and trustworthy, so you don't overpromise and you don't say, oh, I can get you this when you can't, but you are consistent, you come in on time, and you're a nice person to be around. If you have those qualities, you are very rare in this world, and you won't believe it until you get older, but it's true. There are very few people who can do all those things, who are trustworthy, who are nice to be around, who are consistent, and who have ideas. And in my industry, if you have those things, you're going to be a very big success, because very few people have all of those things all in one.
Oh, fantastic. So that's some of the things that we can work on as young people. Most of those things you can learn as you go along. You are in a high school setup, how you interact with your peers. If they ask you things, or even your teacher asking you for homework, when do you submit? Are you meeting the deadlines, and all kind of things? And this will be helpful for you to demonstrate a career.
Absolutely. And things like, for example, I'm thinking about this issue of something that I'm having today in my daily life with the team that I work with. I work with some very good people. Some are better than others. And the people who are really good are the people who you will say, can you get me this interviewee? And maybe they try and get this interviewee to come on my radio show, but the interviewee says no. The person who's really good and who stands out will go and find somebody else. And they'll say to me, you know what? I did try and get that person. They weren't available. So I got you this person. The person who's not so good will give me a long list of, oh yeah, I tried to email them and they didn't reply. And then I couldn't find their phone number and I couldn't, it's great that they're trying, and effort is a really good thing. But if you are somebody who has a versatile mind that can come up with solutions, then you'll go very far. And the same sort of thing goes with school. It's like, if you can't do something, I guess it's kind of different at school, because at school you will still get rewarded for showing effort, and you should put effort in. But you should also, in the world of work, it's not just about effort. It's also about solutions and being creative enough to think about solutions.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So did you ever think about any other career apart from being a rock star? But I just wanted to ask, in terms of when you were, let's say, for example, primary school, and the age, so that's the early years, and then the high school, do you think the ideas changed a bit? Because for me, I always knew I wanted to become a doctor, basically because when I was at the age of 4, I suffered cerebral malaria, and you've visited Malawi before. Cerebral malaria is very endemic, and it kills. So I was in a coma for a while, I'm told. And as my mother was nursing me in the hospital in Malawi, the doctor, Dr. Benham, came around, and he was amazed at the recovery that I went through, and suggested to my mom that, your son should become a doctor. And so that was imprinted in my mind. So everything I did, I was geared towards that. What was your experience in terms of, did you have to swear from one end to another, or
I had a privileged upbringing in London, and I had a very good education, and nothing seemed impossible to me when I was growing up. And I was also fortunate in that I really liked writing, I really liked language, but I was also very interested in science. And that was a good thing, but it was also a problem because I never really knew, I had real problems specializing. And when I had to pick my GCSEs and everybody was either doing sciences or doing arts, for me, I just didn't want to give anything up. I liked doing everything. And with my A-levels, that was even harder. I couldn't pick my A-levels at all. And with my degree, I ended up doing a degree called Social and Political Science, where there were 25 different papers I could choose between. I had to choose 6 of them. So I was always going for the broadest thing. And actually that's worked to my advantage in that I have a career now where I can write about scientific subjects, I can write about politics, I can write about anything that I find interesting. I think my life would have been, my general advice would be, life is a lot simpler if you do specialize, and if you specialize early on, because then you can focus all your energy and attention, you can get the right advice for people. My life has been a lot more complicated because I didn't specialize. I've always enjoyed writing. I don't know if I ever really thought that I would be a writer necessarily, but it's always something that that came easy to me. But then again, I never really fitted into categories of things, because when I was growing up, I thought, you know, you either want to be a writer and, you know, sit behind a computer typing, or you want to be a scientist. And I didn't really understand that there are transferable skills between all of those worlds, and you can write about science and all the rest of it.
I guess this is why we're having these programs, to help the young people have a little bit of specialization in them, in the sense that they know what they want to do.
Yeah.
Once they're chosen, then they can go ahead. I'm probably the same like you. I was meandering between, you know, so many things, but with the primary aim that, oh, I need to be a doctor, just like my mother said. Mm-hmm. But again, thank you for that. And we're going to go to ask you about the demands of the career, this career that you have. I know that you're a parent, you've got young children, and you are working in courts, very, you know, antisocial hours for a parent anyway. How do you, mix all that? And what, if somebody wanted to be like you as a journalist, and they also wanted to have a successful family life, which includes children, how would they see you managing and then helping themselves to say that it can be done?
Well, one of the joys of being a freelance journalist, apart from my radio show, which is antisocial hours, but it's only 3 days a week, and it's at the weekend, and I have my husband who can look after my children, then I'm home by about 10:30 in the morning. So I'm generally not missing much time with my family, although I get very tired. The joy of being a freelance journalist generally is that you're in charge of your own time. So the way it works, for example, if I have an idea for one of my long articles, is I will email my editor at The Guardian and I will say, would you like an article about, I have a list next to my desk here, and I'm looking, there are 6 different boxes of 6 places I write for, and I have lists of different article ideas. Would you like an article on the race to find a cure for peanut allergy? Because there's a French company and there's an American company, and they're racing each other. And my editor will say yes, and then I will agree a time when they want me to give that article in, and that's probably about a month away. And then it's up to me when I work. If some people work better in the evenings, some people work better. I'm definitely a morning person. Obviously, you interview people at a time convenient for your interviewee, but generally there is quite a lot of flexibility. There are disadvantages to being freelance in that you're self-employed, and that means you don't get benefits that you might get if you were employed. For example, if you're a woman, you don't get you get statutory maternity pay from the government, but you don't get a proper maternity pay that you would get if you had a staff job. And when I went and had my children, I thought that would be a problem, but actually it was a good thing. I was sensible with my money. From the beginning, I have always been sensible. Whenever I got paid, my sister gave me this advice when I was very young. It was really useful, which is that when you get paid, when you get your first paycheck, work out in your head how much you actually need to live on, and then get a second bank account and put everything else into that second bank account. And every month now, you know, I know how much I need to live on, and anything that I have that's more than that, I put into this second bank account. And that second bank account is the thing that gives me independence. It's the thing that means that I don't worry, because if you have savings, then you have independence, you have control over your lives, you're not constantly dependent on other people. So that's one of the things I would definitely say it's a good thing to do young. You might, you know, I have an account, for example, now I have lots of savings accounts, but I have one account that my husband and I, we put in £25 a week into this account. And we've been doing this for years and years and years. And this is money that we will use, my children will use to go to university with. It's money that for us, we can afford to put £25 a week in there without noticing it very much. But this money builds up, and you can save many thousands of pounds that way, just by putting aside money that you think that you can spare and you forget about. So yes, I had savings, which meant that I could take a proper maternity leave. And it was good because it meant that I didn't have to come back to work when my boss told me I could come back to work. In some respects, I mean, Mandela mentioned that I did for a long time the Sky News press preview, which meant that I was on late at night. When my baby was, my daughter was 10 weeks old, I started going back and doing that at night time. And that was very doable because my baby would go to sleep and then I'd go off and do this and come back, and I will have done a day's work. So it's suited family life very well for me because I'm in control of my hours. And for a lot of my friends who are women who have had babies and had more conventional jobs, it's meant that they have to go back to work when their boss tells them they have to go back to work. And for some women, that's very hard to suddenly go from nothing to having to be 5 days, spending the whole time with your baby to suddenly 5 days a week back at work. So it suited me.
No, fantastic. I remember you reviewing the papers when your baby was really small. You said it, I think, for Anna Boating. So yeah, yes. I was really surprised that that you had done that. But it is good because you were able to juggle with the family life. Now, I think we need to invite. It's 2:20, but I need to invite a few questions. So. Is anyone with a question? You can just raise your digital hand, or if I can see you or Jenny can see you, just unmute yourself and then ask a question as to what we've discussed so far. May I tell you, no question is irrelevant. All the questions are going to be relevant. If you have a question, ask, and we'll aim to answer it. So over to you guys. Yeah, let's start with, I'm just having a look again. Yeah, Romeo, you have a question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If you wanted to be a journalist or have a podcast or an author, then what, like, for example, what subjects would you need to be good at? Like say if you need to be good at like for some things you need to be good at geography and all of this. So what would you need to be good at to be a journalist?
To be a journalist, most of all, you need to have curiosity. So there's no specific subject that you need to be good at, but you need to be. So first of all, Romeo, you are already marking yourself out as somebody who is could be a good journalist because you're asking me a question. And also it's, particularly when you're younger, it's not very nice. It's a bit scary to kind of put your hand up and ask a stranger a question. So you have to be brave and you have to be curious. So already that's good. It helps if you are good at writing, if you know how to string a sentence together, but there are a lot of journalists who don't. It is good if I don't know if your school has a radio station and you know how to edit audio. That isn't that difficult, editing audio. That can really help, because if you know how to edit audio, you can make a podcast on your own. That's a pretty simple thing to do. Equally though, you don't need to know any of this stuff. If you have a phone with a camera on it, and you can make a video and you can put it on YouTube. It doesn't even need to be beautifully shot. But what editors, the people who give people work, what they're looking for is, do you have an original idea and do you have access? And access means, has somebody let you into their world? So is there somebody really interesting who's given you an interview? Is there an institution that is fascinating that you can tell the story of? Maybe it's the busiest maternity hospital in London. Maybe it's someone in your local community who is old and has lived a really exciting life or has witnessed something themselves. Maybe it is somebody who's survived cerebral malaria and can talk about that. If you capture that and ask them questions that get them to open up in a really interesting way, you can do it on your phone. And what editors are looking for is not necessarily skills in any of those academic subjects, but they're looking for people who have energy, people who have curiosity, people who have tenacity, people who are brave and are prepared to go out and ask questions. And you can prove all of those things without being kind of very slick at filming or at recording. I would say though, being technically competent, knowing how to make websites, knowing how to edit sound or video is going to go very far for you if you want to be a journalist. But also writing is, you know, for me, it really helps me that, you know, a lot of what I do as a journalist is I do investigative journalism, and then that what matters is being able to have a command of details. Like, for example, you need to know what people's titles are properly. You need to know what people's names are. You need to be able to spell things right, because if you're searching for things on the internet and you're spelling it wrong, you're not going to get the right answers. So all of those things matter, but more than any specific, you know, being good at geography, being good at biology, or any of those things, you need to have curiosity, and you need to have good oracy skills so that you can go up and interview people and be bold, as you seem to be already, Romeo.
Oh, fantastic. Romeo, that was a really great question. And thanks, Jenny, for answering it. And again, Jenny is trying to give you core skills that you need, core skills that will save you in the long term. And if you choose to be a journalist and you choose to do something, you know, in a particular subject, you can always learn on the job as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. A large part of being a journalist also is learning on the job, because quite often you're not an expert in the story that you've been given. I'm looking at this peanut allergy story here. I've become more of an expert in allergies. My son has an allergy, and I wrote a big article about allergies, but before I wrote that article, I wasn't so much of an expert on all the different causes. You're constantly learning all the time as a journalist. You have to have this ability to learn. So nobody will be assessing you for what you already know. They're looking for those key skills that you can apply to new things all the time.
Yeah, fantastic. We are going to go for another question. Feel free to ask questions. I can put you on the spot, but I don't want to do that because I want to be kind to everyone. As Jenny said, it's okay. Zai and Zonse, there's a question from you. Unmute and ask.
Was it hard when you first started your freelance journaling career? Like, was it hard to get jobs and find editors that are willing to, like, hear your stories?
Yes, it was really hard. It's much easier now, because now I can contact people out of the blue and say, look at these things, these wonderful things I've written for The Guardian. Hey, I've written a book and the New York Times says it's fantastic. And then, of course, you know, people take me seriously. But it was much harder at first. And the way that it worked at first, and in fact still now, is that if I had an idea, in fact, I should have said this earlier on, the thing that you need to be a journalist is to read very widely. And, you know, I also make documentaries for television. You need to watch a lot of TV, and then you need to look in the credits and see which production company. It will always say at the end of the credits which production company made it, which people made it. And you have to read a lot of newspapers and get a sense of what you like. And you need to be ambitious, and inside your head think, I would like to see my work on this page, or I would like to be making this program, and then work out who makes that and try and find out how to contact them. So for me, my ambition when I was growing up was always to write for The Guardian's weekend magazine, which I love. I think it's a fantastic magazine. And I would come up with ideas for them. And then I rang the switchboard of The Guardian and I said, can you put me through to Weekend Magazine? And they put me through, and I said, okay, who commissions freelancers? They gave me the name of the person, and I emailed that person. I didn't have any personal connection, but I would email the person. And at first it would be very difficult when I was doing things like that, because people didn't know me. I was an unproven quantity. And that's where things will be easier for you guys, because people will expect you to say, you know, look at my blog, or look at my Twitter feed, or I've got a YouTube channel where I've already done something. You know, you can prove yourself online already. I didn't necessarily have that. And at first it was very difficult because A, people didn't know who I was, and B, I had some really good ideas, and sometimes people stole those ideas. So I would pitch an idea and say, I think, you know, it would look really good in your pages if we did a piece on, you know, this story. I remember I sent something to Time Out magazine when it still existed, and they didn't take it from me, and then they got a member of staff to write it. And it was a very, very specific story that I know they wouldn't have had this idea from elsewhere, and I know they took it from me. And that really burned me at first. It really bothered me. And then I realized the way around that, which is to go and find the interviewees first and get them to agree to talk to me. And so I would send the idea, and it wouldn't just be, I've got this story about the cure for peanut allergies, I think we should be doing that. It would be, I've got this story for this cure for peanut allergies, and the person who runs the company has already said they'll give me an interview. And so then they can't take the idea away from me, because I've already got the access. And sometimes people have asked me, well, how do you get the access if you can't already say to your interviewee, I write for The Guardian, I've made programs for the BBC. How can you get someone to agree to talk to you? And the answer is, and here is a really important piece of advice, particularly in the world that we're living in now. If you really, really listen to people and what they're saying, then you can have a superpower. Because in the world that we live in now, people do not listen. People are used to writing little lines on Twitter and on Instagram and having very short attention spans. But if you show people that you have really bothered to read about them and research them beforehand, that you really know what they're thinking, then they are much more likely to respect you because they know that you have taken the time to get to know them. For example, I did my show this morning. I'm very busy. I am generally a very busy person. I agreed to do this because it was clear from the way that Mandela approached me that he knew about my work and he had spent time engaging with what I do. You will get people to agree to talk to you if you put in the work beforehand, researching them and showing that you really are familiar with them. You're not just emailing a million people and waiting for one person to come back to you. You have really specifically wanted that interviewee to talk to you. That's a rather long answer, but yes, it was difficult at first and I had to learn how to make it work. But ultimately you get to a point where your record speaks to yourself, speaks for itself, and you get a reputation for being somebody with ideas, who's reliable. I never give my work in late. My work does not have mistakes in it. I never say to my editor, I never promise something that I can't deliver. I never say, I'm going to get you an interview with the Queen or whatever. I only ever tell people I've got the interview with the Queen when it's already done. And because of that, now people come to me with ideas or ask me to do work. But it takes a while to get that reputation. But this is one of these things that you can start with now. You can start small. You can interview people in your local community. You can start reading those magazines and watching television programs and trying to work out what you like now, so that in future, when you're pitching to editors, they know that you really want your work to be on their pages and you're not just sending this idea to everywhere just to see wherever it can get pitched, that it's an idea that's tailored to their output.
Yeah, fantastic. And actually, you could even write a summary of what we've done today in terms of how you found this program, and write it for your own school. Schools have got newsletters. Your headmistress will be happy to receive it. And that's the starting point. And as Jenny said, I had to learn a lot about her work. I researched a lot, read a lot of the articles, and I said to myself, I really need Jenny to be the one who speaks about this important subject. So I'm thankful that she said yes, but again, as she said, it was because it was specific. I wasn't just emailing randomly.
Yes, I get a lot of people who clearly email randomly. You can tell when somebody has sent an email to a million different journalists and you just happen to be one of them. If you imagine if there's something that you know really well and somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about is talking to you about it, you can tell very quickly. And what I'm trying to say in all of that is, this is something you can turn to your advantage. You can turn your focus and concentration on the fact that you've really bothered to read and engage in research as a way of standing out, because a lot of people don't do that and a lot of people are quite lazy.
You mentioned something about people stealing ideas. In literature, we talk about that P word where you steal ideas from other people. Do you want to introduce that word to the young people?
So there is a word, plagiarism, which is stealing ideas. Well, in journalism, it means something more specific, unfortunately, than stealing ideas. You can't copyright an idea. So you can't say, I own that idea, it belongs to me, and if you take it, you're stealing from me. It doesn't work that way. In journalism and in writing, also in academic life, plagiarism is when you copy something, when you copy sentences and paragraphs, and you literally copy people's writing. And you can never do that. I mean, another thing about being a freelance journalist, as opposed to someone with a staff job who works for the Guardian permanently or whatever, is my reputation is incredibly important. If I get a reputation for not being trustworthy, my career is over. Whereas, if you work for an institution, you're always using the institution as your brand, as the reason why people should trust you. Trust me, I'm from the BBC, you should trust me. And so that's a shorthand for things, but I can't necessarily tell people that. People have to trust me because I am a journalist has a track record of being trustworthy. So I always have to, you can accidentally plagiarize stuff. You don't have to be a bad person who is literally taking someone's article, copying, pasting, and putting someone's name at the top of it. You can accidentally plagiarize. When you're taking notes, sometimes you will be reading articles online and you might copy a little bit of it and put it into your notes. And if you don't put it in italics or put it in bold or mark out exactly where you got it, if you go back to your notes in 2 months' time, you might think, oh yeah, that's a really nice sentence. I wrote that very well. I'll use that in my final draft. You have to be really careful of that. So whenever I'm writing notes and I'm copying and pasting from other sources, I put it in italics so that I know that I'm never going to be copying things literally. You have to be particularly careful in this digital age of plagiarism because you will get found out if you copy things. People Google articles wholesale and see whether or not bits of the article have come out elsewhere. It doesn't matter if you can be inspired by other people's work, but you have to put it into your own words. With ideas, people can steal your ideas because you can't copyright an idea. But part of the art of being a journalist is having lots of ideas. You have to learn how to get ideas. And so for me, I know that some of my ideas will get stolen, but A, they probably won't be done in the same way that I would do it, so I can probably still do it. And B, I have lots of ideas, and if some of them don't go anywhere, then it doesn't matter because I've got others. And perhaps I should say something about how I get ideas. People often ask me, how do you get all of your ideas? And this is the secret. I have a notebook. I have a notebook that I always have on me everywhere. You don't have to have a physical notebook. I like these ones. I have the black ones are for different. This is my Times Radio notebook that I'm working with at the moment. And this is my general notebook that is, I have, when I finish a notebook, I write the date on the spine and I put them in my shelf, and downstairs, I have about 400 of these. And I just always have a way of writing things down. Quite often you get ideas by talking to people. You might have ideas when you're walking down the street. You might read something and it might give you an idea. You get ideas from being exposed to lots of interesting things. So going to meetings like this will give you ideas, or reading a book will give you ideas, or talking to people, engaging with people will give you ideas. You have to be a curious person. You have to read very, very widely. Write stuff down. Some of the ideas on my ideas list, this peanut idea, that is the one that I seem to be using in this talk, it's been in my book. It's been in my ideas book for 2 or 3 years now, and I'm always trying to find a home for it. Sometimes, there are ideas that I have waiting for years for me in my list of ideas, and then eventually I do something really, really big with it. So you don't necessarily have to use an idea immediately, but you just need to write it down, and you need to look back on it and think, because sometimes new ideas come from combinations of old ideas. So you need to be curious, and you need to also constantly be writing down things that you find interesting.
Yeah, fantastic. We've got a question from Tawonga. I just need to introduce her. She's my daughter. She's on the call. So Tawonga, could you unmute and ask the question?
Hi, my question is it hard to interview people? Sometimes how people refuse to be interviewed because they just don't want to. Is it hard to interview people?
That's a good question. Generally, I don't really interview people who don't want to be interviewed because, as you say, they tend to not be very good interviewees. But sometimes you have to do that. So sometimes if you're doing a story, for example, about where you're making accusations of wrongdoing, like you're accusing a company of behaving badly to its employees, or you are making accusations. Maybe you not that you would ever do this, but say you were doing a story and you were saying that a certain teacher was too strict, for example. It would be bad journalism to just interview lots of students saying this teacher is too strict, and then not go to the teacher and ask for their, it's called a right of reply. You have to give them a right of reply. But yes, generally, I only really do interviews with people who want to be interviewed. And before you interview people, you need to explain why you're interviewing them and who you're interviewing them for. So if I was going to interview you, Tawonga, I would send you an email, or I'd ring you up beforehand and I'd say, I'm Jenny Kleeman. I am doing a report for my Times Radio show, or I'm writing a long article, and I want to interview you on this subject of what it's like to have Mandela as your father. Is this something that you're prepared to talk to me about? And maybe the answer is no. And if the answer is no, then I would go and find somebody else. I wouldn't keep pursuing you. The only reason to keep pursuing somebody is if you're making allegations against them. And even then they can still say no. And then you have to say in your piece, you know, I tried to talk to this teacher that all the students are saying is very strict, but she declined to be interviewed. You have to say that. So sometimes it's not fun to approach people cold. I know certainly when I was younger, until I was really quite old, it took a lot of courage to pick up the phone and to call somebody that I didn't know and explain. I mean, now I find it incredibly easy, but it's not something that comes naturally. And another piece of advice that I would give you is whenever you feel a bit uncomfortable, like, oh, I'm going to have to go and talk to somebody I don't know, or even in a situation like this, I'm going to have to raise my hands and ask Jenny a question and I'm a bit nervous. Whenever you have that feeling, it's because you're about to do something brave and extraordinary, and that everybody has that feeling, and that feeling stops some people from having exciting experiences or taking that step further. So it's a good feeling. It's a feeling that tells you you're about to be tenacious and do something brave. But it's totally natural to have those feelings, and also to be a bit nervous going into interviews, I would say. But also you have to prepare for interviews, which makes you less nervous. The more prepared you are, the less nervous you'll be.
Yeah, fantastic. I had a feeling of being fearful because I was going to interview Jenny Kleeman, whose work involves interviewing people, and my work doesn't in any way, shape or form. But as she said, if you watch lots of TV, if you read lots of papers, you get the gist of how things go. For example, I'll give you an example that Jenny mentioned. When I look at I really like the papers review because I get a glimpse of a little bit of more about the story that's being reported. So when I saw the news anchor, I think the other one is called Anna Jones, asking you questions, and you were on with, I think that time it was Stig Abel. When you sort of raise a point about somebody who is not there, and then it's almost a little bit saying, oh, they did this, they would chip in and say, oh, unfortunately, they can't be here to defend themselves. So I gathered from that, okay, you need to give them a right to defend themselves. You cannot just have a one-way system. So. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and that is basic kind of journalistic stuff that, in fact, you only really learn in the course of being a journalist, that you have to be balanced like that. You have to give people an opportunity to give their side. And also, that makes your story better anyway. It always, you know, even if you're trying to make a really strong story, say you have really, really strong evidence that something really bad is happening, you want to put that evidence to the people who are doing that bad thing, because it will make the story more interesting. And if they refuse to speak to you, that in itself tells a story. So it's actually a good part of the job. But that's only, so as I said, the people who are reluctant to be interviewed, who aren't present to give their side of the story, that only really applies when you're making criticism of people. In general, it's always good to have people happy to be speaking to you when you're interviewing them.
Okay, we'll devote the last part to being an author. Most of the children like reading children's books. Probably that's not what you write about. But in your Facebook live post, while promoting this book, you said that it took you 5 years to complete this book. And I was saying, wow, 5 years! What happened in between? How do you keep motivated? How do you keep the strength to go through this? Obviously, within that 5 years, you are changing. There's life-changing events within your family.
Yes.
So can you tell us, is it because you've written a book, if somebody wants to write a book, what are the things that they need to look at?
Well, it's important to say that I wasn't solely working on this book for 5 years. I was doing the reporting over 5 years, and that means I was going out and doing the interviews and doing the research for 5 years, but I wasn't doing the actual writing of the book for 5 years. I also had a baby in the middle of these 5 years, so I took some time off for that as well, but not tons of time off, but I did take some time off for that. The book that I wrote is non-fiction, and if you're writing fiction, I can tell you a bit about how the publishing industry works. So if you're an author, generally, you need to find a publisher, a publishing house, who will put the book out. And what that means is they will print the book, they will make the cover of the book, and they have the relationships with bookshops so that they will get the book in shops. And if you are writing fiction, then you need to have written the book you need to have finished the book before you approach the publisher. If you're writing non-fiction, as I do, you need to write a book proposal where you say, this is my idea for the book, and this is what is going to be in every chapter. And publishers give you a book deal on the basis of that proposal. So that's what happened with me. And I got paid a little bit of money before I'd written the book, because I need to have money to go and travel. The book that I wrote involved traveling to America and traveling all over the world, really. And I needed to have some money to live off while I wrote the book. But also it wasn't enough money to live off, so I had to do other things. I wrote lots of articles during that time. I was doing the Sky News press preview throughout that time. I made some videos at the same time. And I also wrote articles around some of the subjects that are in my book to sustain me at the same time. I found writing the book the most happy time of my life. I really, really enjoyed it. But that's also because I'm really like my own company. Yeah. So I like going off and interviewing people. That's really wonderful. I love talking to people, but I'm very happy. I mean, where I'm sitting right now, that's where I wrote my book. I'm very happy being in my room, shutting the door and writing. I can spend hours like this and I'm very happy doing it. Some people are not like that though. Some people really want to be around other people. There are some people who write books and can only do it in a cafe where there's lots of noise. I'm not like that at all. I have lots of earplugs here because I need to be in total silence all of the time. But in order to write a non-fiction book, you have to have a very clear idea in advance. In fact, even with fiction as well, you have to have a very clear idea in advance of what you're going to write. And by that, I don't mean that you need to have done a lot of work, but you need to have bullet points of where you think the story is going to go, because otherwise you can get a bit lost. And this is it, particularly if you're writing books for adults, which have, 300, 400 pages. If you're writing children's books, then you don't need to write so much. You can just start and start writing, but you have to be prepared that your work is going to be edited. You're going to go over it again and again and again and make it as good as it possibly can be before it goes out.
Thank you. That's interesting for the people to know. And I just wondered whether, to be honest with you, whether if to say that this web conference was a success, it doesn't need one of our young people to become a journalist, but for me to define this as a success is to enthuse them into how to choose a career for themselves. And I'm so thankful that you've made all the steps that are necessary. It doesn't matter which career you choose, but these are the steps. You've got to have some core skills that are important, and then obviously that some specific skills for a specific career. Yeah. But again, it's never too early to choose a career. In fact, the earlier you do, the better you can harness what needs to be done in order to achieve that. And I'm thinking, for example, we'll probably in the future, we might have a footballer here to talk about the career in football. In football, and this is, I'm told that there's a pyramid. So a lot of players start as, a lot of young people start as players, but only a few make to the elite. Mm. What is it like in your industry?
That is a really good question.
Yes.
It does start, it is a bit like that. And it's particularly like that for women, because when you get to being in your late 30s and 40s and you have children, for a lot of women, it is very difficult to accommodate doing a job, for example, particularly in television, where you're expected to work very, very long hours. It doesn't make sense. It's not worth the trade-off of having a family. As a freelance journalist, you get to a critical point where you think, can you make the living that you need? Because I should have said this from the beginning, you will not get rich as a freelance journalist. You can make a living that is a good living, that a family can live off, and you will have an extremely interesting, fulfilled life, but you're very unlikely to be wealthy. And if I look back in my 20s, there were a lot of people who were doing similar things to me, who I know then retrained and did other things. So there are people who did front of camera things like I'm doing, like I have done, presenting or being a broadcaster, which meant that they had very good oracy skills. They were good at speaking, and they were unfazed by speaking in public. A lot of those people retrained and became barristers or lawyers because they liked details and they were good at performing. So they performed in court instead of performing on television. You have to be prepared at a certain point in your life to make decisions. You can't make those decisions too late in life. So it would be the sort of thing that by the end of your 20s, you need to look back and see, is this what you want to do? Is this taking you where you want to go? And football it's a really good, there's two things I would say. So it's an interesting thing to talk about, because you need to have a contingency plan. You need to have a backup plan for if this doesn't work. So let's say you're a fantastic footballer. You still probably need to do well at school, because you need to have a backup plan for what happens if this doesn't work out. And equally, you need to get smart with financial management as early as possible. You know, some of the most successful Premier League footballers have gambling problems, for example. They're used to having so much money and then they waste it or they throw it away. And you can never rely on the fact that this kind of thing is going to last forever. So you know, if there's one thing, I mean, there are several things I want you to take away from this. And one is that you need to be curious. The other is that you need to listen. You need to be reliable, but that it's never too early to get into the habit of saving, because savings give you freedom. Savings give you independence. And no matter, you know, what career you are in, if you have a little pot of money that is there waiting for you if things go wrong, you will be emboldened to take professional chances, because the risks won't be so great if you know you have this nest egg there for you.
Fantastic. We are going towards the end of the program. It's about 10 minutes to go. And there are a few of our listeners here, participants that are from Malawi as well. So we thank them for joining, and some are from South Africa. So your connection with Africa goes a long way. You've done lots of stories from that part of Africa. Just in brief, how did you like your time in Malawi and thereabouts?
I loved Malawi. It's an absolutely beautiful, beautiful country with actually really interesting journalists there. The local journalist that I was working with was one of the most gifted people that I've ever worked with. Very, very smart, very sharp. The story that I did in Malawi, I did a story about tobacco farming and children being involved in the tobacco industry, children not going to school, but instead working in tobacco fields and doing it without wearing gloves, which meant they got green tobacco sickness from absorbing the nicotine through their skin. It was a remarkable country. It is a shame that so much of the GDP depends, well, I don't know how much things have changed since I made that documentary, which was 10 years ago, but so much of the GDP came from the tobacco industry, and it's a real shame, because it's a country that could be doing that has beautiful land that should be dedicated to other things. But I found the Malawian people wonderfully welcoming, and it was a real privilege to get to see the country.
Okay, fantastic. And I hope in future we'll meet either there or here. But it's been wonderful sharing these experiences with us. I want to give an opportunity for one or two more last questions before. Oh, Romeo, you've got a hand up again. Thank you, Romeo.
For example, if I'm not saying that this happens, but for example, say if someone was asking if they wanted to do something with a journalist or with you, then how much would they offer to because most people, how much would they offer to pay for people to come to them, like famous people?
What exactly do you mean? Do you mean paying famous people to be interviewed, or do you who are you talking about in terms of being paid?
That's just paying people to to be interviewed.
I never pay people to be interviewed, because generally the thinking is in journalism that journalists should not pay their interviewees, because then their interviewees are kind of performing for you, and you're not getting the real truth from them. They're telling you what they think you want to hear, and you're buying that from them. That's not to say that all journalists do that. A lot of newspapers, like The Sun, a lot of tabloid newspapers, a lot of magazines will pay interviewees. Also, a lot of celebrity interviewees, for example, they might not ask to be paid, but they will have something to promote. Like they want you to talk about their new film, or they want you to talk about their new book or their new album. And so it's still a transaction that they're agreeing to talk to you in exchange for you mentioning this product. So celebrities tend not to be paid, and some members of the public are paid, but they tend to be paid by very different kinds of journalists to the journalist I am. Also, you know, I can't afford to pay people. When I ask people for an interview, what I say is, this is me. Here are examples of things I've done in the past. I have a reputation for doing things in an intelligent way. I write for prestigious places. I have I make television programs for serious places. So I am a good person to tell your story if you want it told in an intelligent way. And actually, it's very, very rare that people have asked me to pay them. And there's only one occasion where that was a deal breaker and somebody said they wanted me to pay them. And I said I wasn't going to, and the interview didn't happen. And that person, after my article came out, she got in touch with me and said that she regretted it and she really wished that she'd spoken to me anyway. So that was very satisfying. Okay,
I had the question in a different way as well, but I think you're right that he was asking that question you've answered. But can I ask an added question because of how I interpreted his question? Is it possible for somebody in our group here who is interested in journalism to come and do an understudy in future, to just have a hands-on experience, you know, like a work experience?
There are always work experience opportunities in different outlets. I know that the Times has lots of work experience opportunities. Your local paper will have work experience opportunities. In terms of work experience opportunities with me, there isn't very much to see. It's just me sitting here sending emails, so there's not that much to see. But certainly for many of the organizations I have relationships with, there will be opportunities, and you know, you can get in touch with me and I can investigate that. Certainly, experience counts for a lot, so it's worth doing work experience whenever you can, I would say.
Yeah, we'll take a poll after this. I'll send out a poll about what people took from here, and then we'll see how it was. Taweni, you have a question. I'm mindful that I need to give you a space before I ask my question. Taweni, go ahead.
Which topic did you enjoy writing about the most?
Which topic did I enjoy? That's such a big question. So my book was a book about different kinds of technologies that are going to change what it means to be human. And it looked at 4 different inventions. And the writing of that book was the greatest joy for me. But that's not so much to do with the topics, although I really enjoyed the topics. It's to do with the fact that I got to write it in the style that I felt really was my voice. I wish I had more of a specialism. That's another piece of advice. You know, Mandela's right. You need to specialize as early as possible. Your life will be a lot simpler if you do. But for me, I have made a specialism of not specializing, which is probably why I've got to do the paper review and I've got to present this show on Times Radio, is that I have a very broad range of interests. Certainly when I was a foreign correspondent, I love more than anything else meeting ordinary people and hearing the stories of ordinary people. I don't really enjoy interviewing politicians. I've never wanted to interview celebrities. I think you can find the most extraordinary things in the world through talking to ordinary people. So I loved doing that. I loved traveling the world and talking to ordinary people from around the world and seeing how much we all have in common, whether it's in Honduras or Afghanistan or Malawi or Nigeria. It really restored my faith in human nature. So that was a real privilege.
And suffice to say that because of your sort of specializing in lack of specialism, it helped me to actually get you on board as well, because you saw this as an opportunity to help young people. So I'm so thankful to Jenny for
my pleasure.
Yes. And the last bit of information that I would want to ask from you is, for example, do we all have to go to uni to become a journalist, or can you do it without going through the traditional university way?
You can certainly do it without going through the traditional university way. And I would also say that there are a lot of people who might think that you need to do a master's in journalism to become a journalist. And I don't really work with anybody who's done a master's, because to be a journalist, as I was saying, you have to have original ideas and you have to go out and make them happen. And being in an educational institution, a higher educational institution, is stopping you from doing that in many ways, unless you're making a show reel or whatever. Going to university is a really good thing. It's a real privilege if you get to do it. And so I would always say, if you can, then go to university. But nowadays, if you want to be a journalist, what you need to do is have lots of ideas and prove that you can do something with them. So go and take your phone out and do a little, make a tiny video of that interesting person, or go and ask questions and find out something new and write it for your school paper or your local paper. Those are the things that will get you a job, rather than having got an excellent degree. I went to a very good university. I did very, very well in my exams. I got a double first, which is the best that you can get. Nobody has ever asked me what I got in my degree in the course of being a journalist. I wish it mattered, because I worked really hard and I'm very proud of it. It's never mattered. All anyone cares about is what have you done? What are you going to do next?
Thank you so much for that. We've come to the end of our program, and I'm just so thankful for your time, Jenny, and I thank all the participants. The questions that they've raised, they are going to be helpful. We're going to keep this as a library of experience. Anyone who wants to review this, they can review, and it's also on our Facebook page. So thank you so much. Do you want to say something in parting, Jenny?
Yes, I just want to say it's been such a pleasure to talk to all of you, and that you're already doing good things for your future. If you're giving up your Sunday afternoon to come here and hear ideas from new people who you might have not heard of already, you're already laying fantastic groundwork for an excellent future. So you're on the right path already, I would say. Thank you for having me.